You're listening to So Organised Style podcast produced by me, Maria Theoharis, Susan Goodwin of Measure Twice, Cut Once Patterns, and Anne Wally, the Pattern Whisperer. From October to the 22nd of March next year, the Powerhouse Museum has a special collection by Jenny Key and Lynn Jackson called Step Into Paradise. This collection is the first in-depth survey that captures the dynamic energy of Linda and Jenny's creative partnership. It draws on more than 4 decades of one of the most influential pairings in the history of Australian fashion, examining the influences, inspirations, and the compelling stories behind their work. Honoured as officers of the Order of Australia for their contributions to Australia's fashion industry, Jenny Key and Linda Jackson transformed the nation's fashion and cultural heritage with their pioneering style, inspired by Australia's cultural and natural landscape, melded with their global influences. This exhibition begins with their creative partnership in the 70s at the Flamingo Park Frock Salon at Sydney's Strand Arcade, and the sensational Flamingo fashion parades branching into their distinctive individual careers through to recent years, including Jenny's costume designs for the Sydney Olympic Games and their collaborations with Australian designers. Romance was born. Over 150 garments, textiles, photographs and artworks, many unseen from the museum's own extensive collection, are brought together with the designer's personal archives. Highlight pieces on display include artwork from the pair and archival behind-the-scenes photographs. Jenny's black opal Chanel suit from Karl Lagerfeld's first collection in 1983 and Linda Jackson's iconic Waratah dress. This episode is an audience member's view of the conversation, so the sound is what it is. Thanks for listening.
I'm not sure, probably some of you have been to the exhibition, but we started going in backwards. So we got to go through all the different landscapes of our special places and the bush and the rainforest and going all the way through. And then the last few rooms that were done were the Flamingo Park rooms, the red room and the blue room. So for Jenny, when she walked into those rooms and they evoked so beautifully, the tears and the emotion of it was spectacular. I mean, the team really have captured the beginnings and the beauty of that beautiful space. It is divine. So we're all going emotional.
It's mine too. The shop opened on the 27th of August, 1973 at 11 o'clock. Reggae time. I said that a few times. Peter Tully was the first person who walked through the door. And to go into that blue room was the very first room. To go into that room now, I get chills. You know, I was swaying to the palm trees back then, and it's 50 years later, Millie, and I'm swaying even more. It's just the most extraordinary thing to be able to recreate the magic that we gave to Sydney. We brought it all back home. I've been in London. Look, I just saw performance last night. My God. It is a movie. I will digress, but that is a movie. That is one of the great movies. Mick Jagger, James Fox, Anita Pallenberg, an incredible movie. So it brought back to me what London was, how hot it was in 1968. They just recreated this incredible scene and so authentically amazing. So I was filled with that movie and just thinking about, I'm getting lost here, coming home to Australia and knowing what I'd lived through in London, I had to create something that was like nothing else. And that's how it was formed. It was formed in the back room of Murgamora's sort of little back room of Murkamura, because we came back to have an exhibition with George Moore, and Michael was a beautiful artist. And I had to think, now I'm living with an artist, I'm the one who's got to earn the money. What am I going to do? Because we wanted to stay in Australia. And that is how the shop was devised, the painting, Flamingo Park, how exciting, how romantic, how beautiful. So the painting became the icon of the shop. And
painting is in the exhibition now.
The original painting is there.
Which is amazing.
But it's just to have thought of a painting to be, it was going to be a clothes shop or a frock seller. But to have the painting as it set the tone for art and fashion. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And yes, Glynis. You want to say something?
Well, we're gonna come back into the London years and everything and that whole.
I can't help it though, Dan, because I just saw a performance last night after I hadn't seen it for 30-something years.
Oh yeah. Well, we actually we were wishing we'd actually been recording our conversation backstage, because there was talk of parties with Karl Lagerfeld, there was talk of all sorts of things. It was very entertaining and interesting, but probably not for public consumption. Now, when you were putting this exhibition together, though, you were seeing items that you hadn't seen for a long time. What was that process like, having to go through 2 lifetimes of work, effectively, from all sorts of different places?
That's been extraordinary, because the Powerhouse have had, from 1980 onwards, an incredible collection of our work, the first pieces that they bought, and then over the years, late 80s, early 90s, they had my pretty comprehensive collection, Jenny's amazing collection, but full of artworks and paintings and textiles, as well as the clothes. So I guess for us both, we've forgotten what was in all the drawers that are in the archive collection of the Powerhouse Museum. So when the drawers would be opened and I'd be looking at drawings of Jenny's that were done all those years ago, it was awesome, because it's like, that's so beautiful. They're amazing to see. I mean, I was so thrilled to be able to witness some of the early works that I'd seen being drawn at the time, but now they're preserved.
You encouraged me.
Well, you encouraged me.
No, but she did. She encouraged me to do. I'm such a sort of very insecure person, and Linda was like, her guiding light. She was just she encouraged so many people, and I know I did too, but she encouraged me. And I have to say that to you, darling, tonight, and I will. Reveal a lot of things.
Okay.
Well, look, speaking of that, I mean, I was going to get that a bit later, but when here, you've kind of been, in a sense, muses for each other. I mean, you'll see on the photos and in the exhibition tonight, if you haven't already seen it, I mean, there's everyone in each other's clothing. You were just such a team, and was it a real sort of muse and friendship relationship?
Well, the muse for me, I studied photography with Paul Cox in Melbourne in 1968, and I still did take photographs. And then when I met Jenny, she became my muse for my photographs that were like my art form in the landscape. That was our meditation. Jenny would be dressed as a waratah or the squidly gum dress, of course. And we'd go walking in the bush together, her place in the Blue Mountains, and in the backyard, acres of beautiful national forest. And we'd spend the days there, and that was our very special time. And they were very special photographs, and we're lucky that the Powerhouse is, there's a few big ones in there, but,
But they haven't seen all of them.
No, they haven't.
No. That's another thing. Don't know everything. We did some very erotic photos.
Of course.
We did amazing erotic photos after the fires, where Linda painted me up in charcoal direct from the earth, just all over my face, and body. They are the most beautiful erotic series of a woman taking a woman's photographs. They're probably some of the best I could ever say in the world.
Well, it's a different gaze, isn't it?
Because of the subject, it was about after the fire. And I was like this bush woman with these incredible pieces of fabric of silk, which were all Linda slashing with screens of gum leaves and black and red. And they were so emotive because, I wear black and red all the time because, and red being the Waratah. And she just captured this extraordinary after the fire, then they come up. And I was like the coming out of the fire woman. And they're extraordinary collection of photographs. So just want to share that.
Now we all really want to see them. Am I right?
So we can arrange those sorts of events in here.
Only girls.
I tell you, this talk has already taken directions I had not anticipated. I'm very happy about it. I'm here for the ride. So, Jenny, was Linda as much of a muse for your work?
No, I was her muse.
Right, so that was the dynamic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was her muse. And I tell you, I got very upset when she started photographing other women. I have to say. Because we held something that was so amazing and special for those 10 years. And when I say it was a creative love affair, that's what it was. There was no sex involved with this. Really there wasn't. It was just this amazing pulsing thing where we just drew on each other's creative energy. And each one would come up with an idea, and then it would go to another idea, and then another one, until we were just creating these most extraordinary fashion shows they were fashion shows, but they weren't. They were events. They were just, we get immersed in what shall we think of as a subject for one of our shows?
Well, the reef, the rainforest.
Yeah, but when we went to the desert and Crete and India, that was
every year there'd be things that were coming into our mind from being out in the landscape, and maybe the gum trees in the bush and those early waratahs and flowers and things were the ones that were first, and then we'd know that we'd do a show at the end of the year, so we'd be working together with our separate ways of the drawings, the knittings, the paintings, however we could create whatever we wanted to make. We would explore every different way that we could. So, we knew we had to have 100 garments for the end of the year. We'd have a beautiful program and an amazing catalogue. We'd name every single dress, so every single...
And they had songs to match.
They had to have their own song to match in the show, yes. And our model gorgeous friends would sometimes, they'd be able to choose the dresses that they loved to wear, because everyone had to have the feeling of what they were wearing. It wasn't just, you're not just wearing a dress or a knit. You are getting into the mode and the feeling of it. And I think all this is represented in this gorgeous exhibition that's here.
Because Australia would not have seen catwalk parades like this at that point, right? Early 70s.
The first one was in the Hingara restaurant in Chinatown.
I love this story so much. Why did you choose that venue?
Because Dad ate there all the time. Yeah, because my father was sort of like a silent king around Chinatown, because he was the big gambler and he was the SP bookmaker, and so all the Chinese cooks and everyone would do their bets with Dad. So, and also he was just a brilliant cook and natural, because he was a drover's cook when he was 13 years old up in Normanton, and when he came down to Sydney, his skills they even got better when he was a market man, because he used to cook every Thursday for 20 odd of the market men, and they just thought that was the greatest thing. But anyway, Dad was Chinatown was his. I mean, he spent more time in Chinatown because he actually would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then he'd work till 2 or so in the afternoon, make this big feast, and then he'd sleep in the car for about 3 hours, and then he'd go to the gambling table and gamble all night till he started working again. So he knew everyone in Chinatown, and so that's why we chose the Hingara, because that was his favourite place to eat.
And we had a ritual that in the early days my studio was in Bondi Road, opposite the Paris Cake Shop, and it would be that Jenny would come, we'd see each other all through the week, of course, but she'd come on a Friday morning, pick up the frocks, we'd go to Chinatown and have yum cha, a tradition every Friday at the Hingara, and then we'd go to the shop and then she'd go up to the mountains.
But anyway, we chose the Hingara because it also had, pale lemon, pale blue, pale pink laminated walls. Yeah. So all the tables were yum cha, then food cleared away, and then that became the catwalk, the tables.
So good.
And upstairs was those rickety stairs, remember? Oh my God, I kept thinking, oh Mum, don't fall down the stairs. Mum went in the morning to clean the upstairs because it was full of food and everything. So, and that's where all the models changed.
They had to walk down the stairs to go onto the catwalk.
That was our very first parade in Sydney in 1974. Yeah, 1974, 10th of December 1974. Yes. I was pregnant with Grace.
And we were decked out in Chinese opera costumes.
That's exactly right. And we started with I Shot the Sheriff with Linda's Opera House dress.
That's in the exhibition.
Which is in the blue room. So,
what was it that first brought you together in terms of your passions around fashion? I hate that phrase, by the way, but anyway.
A passion for fashion?
Yeah.
I thought I was the first one who said that in my book. Now everyone says it.
I know, right? I know, I feel... Anyway, what was it? Because there was a love of vintage fashion that really kind of set you two off, as I understand, knowing that you were kindred spirits.
Well, I worked for Vern Lambert in the Chelsea Antique Market, and that was the beginning of retro fashion. I mean, that was the beginning of... Vern used to collect Art Nouveau vases from a vet in London whose hobby was, collecting Art Nouveau vases and objects. So she had a team of rag and bone men that went all over the stately homes of England. So Vern said to Francis, get them to bring their clothes down from the attics. And that is how it really did start. Because, of course, there was Portobello Road, but it was the rag and bone men going around the stately homes that gave us Poiré, Schiaparelli, V&A. Every label dress that you can imagine came down from those attics, mostly in perfect condition, and that's what we used to sell in the shop, along with little 40s and 30s floral, very popular print, retro clothes. But really, the cream of what was in the Chelsea Antique Market was labelled dresses because of this brilliant idea of Vern's to get the stately homes bringing down the women bringing down their clothes, and that's how we got hold of those clothes. And and there is the famous story of Mick Jagger. I mean, why am I paying 10 quid for this bit of old clobber? Mick, it's got a Schiaparelli label in it. And I mean, I only carried on about performance because, there was young Mick Jagger last night in performance. So divine, in his 20s, wearing vintage clothes from us in the market. And when they go through that clothes rack, you remember, all those clothes that were on those racks were from us in the market. My Haitis from Morocco were on the walls, and that the atmosphere that's in that film was like, it gave me a feeling of the market, and that's the reason I probably am so sort of obsessed with seeing that film last night, because it gave a real feeling of 60s, acid 60s, out of it 60s. It can't be repeated, and we don't want to repeat it. But I'm just so grateful that I did live through it, because it was a time, you know. And Nita's got those crushed velvet pants on, and the cream Victorian lace top with a little boobies showing through. I mean, just amazing. And look, I'm coming on about that film. I can't stop, because Martin Sharp's, because he did all the artwork for it, you know, and you know, the incredible painting of Mick, you know, and his painting of Mick, and Mick looking at the painting, and all of that going on. And then he got his mum to send him over his I'm sorry to go on, but I have to. His drawings of when he was at school at Cranbrook. They were of gangsters, and Martin got his mother to send them over for the film. And when James Fox is in his bathroom, those paintings are above the bath. And it's just those times to be relived. Anyway, that's London. Go on. What was the question?
Well, that was your introduction to vintage, which was amazing.
Good secrets.
Linda, what was your?
We never thought this would be so much fun, did we? But
Yes,
she loved the film
actually, I
just as
did.
much.
Well, these are out the window, frankly. What was you had a different sort of entry to the vintage thing?
My mum and dad were ballroom dancers. It's such a great story. Dad was dancing from when he was 16, and he became a dancing instructor, and the war happened. He was an ambulance driver in New Guinea, lived in Cairns, and then came back down to Beaumaris, Parkdale sort of beach area, and was ballroom dancing again, and had heard that my mother was quite tiny, very good at dancing. She'd won lots of medals and things like that as well, and he asked Mum to go out with him to join another group to do the tango on a special occasion, and they just kept on dancing. And Mum had someone specially make her ball gowns. She used to make her own clothes, and that's how she taught me how to sew. So I had her ball gowns, which I guess you could say my first introduction to vintage, probably, because as I grew up, they were from the 50s, late 40s, early 50s, so I had her frocks as well as my dressing up with costumes for ballet and gymnastics and things like that. And also early, when I went to Emily McPherson College of Domestic Economy in Melbourne to do fashion design. She's good on the detail. Yes. Well, it's such a beautiful classic name. It did become RMIT. And you were not allowed to wear trousers.
Did you get in trouble?
No, I didn't. No, because
You stuck to the rules.
yes, not very often, but yes. So the vintage of then going into the city every day, an hour on the train from Beaumaris, Cheltenham into the city, meant that I could explore the second-hand shops, the opportunity shops, and the antique shops that were in the city of Melbourne, and that really led to my discovery of vintage, because, you know, Melbourne had incredible vintage costume and clothes, and I'd buy some of those when I learned to sew and remodel them to make my own clothes. And so, apart from reading Italian Vogue when I was 15 and things like that, so yeah, that was sort of my early introduction to vintage.
And then you were making tailored pieces and stuff out of old flower bags and
No,
vintage fabrics and things.
That's much later.
Much later, that happened later. And oh wow, chronology's gone all
But
out.
they had Jobs Warehouse as well in
Yes.
Melbourne.
Yeah. With all
Yeah, and the
vintage fabrics.
ballroom, the mum and the dancing, and knowing about what silk taffeta was when I was like 10 years old, you know, couldn't help it.
Now you both left on great international adventures from Australia. First, Jenny, as you said, you went to London. Linda, you sort of took a different route to Europe.
I went the opposite way.
Yeah, why? You did the opposite of the hippie trail, as I understand.
I met Peter Tully, and with Fran Moore, my partner then, we went to live in New Guinea. Fran's sister was living in Madang, her family, so they were going to go to Brisbane for the annual sort of holiday. So we were able to go and live in their place. So New Guinea, we wanted to go there. So, we were there in Madang and Lay for nearly a year, and it was like, we're living here now. We're meant to be travelling. We better get on the road or on the boat. But we flew to the Philippines, then flew to Singapore, got on the cargo ship, then went to Sumatra, and then travelled across through Indonesia to live in Bali for a while. So this is like 1970, 71. Then went back up to Singapore, up to Malaysia, then flew across to Istanbul, Amsterdam, and then we lived in Paris for 6 months. And a bit of London, but yeah, Paris was 6 months.
What was it that you took from the sort of Asian leg of that trip in terms of your fashion inspiration?
Everything about the way women dressed and the way how the women wore their clothes, how they wrapped, twisted and tied and wove and beaded and wrapped, and the practicality of some of the things that they were wearing, so they could move. They looked so beautiful, but they could hold their baskets on their head. All these sorts of things really had a huge effect on me, and I loved learning that. I think a bit of the National Geographic's books growing up inspired me as well about culture and tribal different things like that. So, you know, and then going east and then across and living in Paris for those 6 months was amazing.
What did Paris bring to your life?
The culture, the place, walking everywhere, the theatre, the arts, making costumes for some Spanish actors for some sort of performance. There's always a sewing machine would appear wherever I was, and I'd be making clothes for the different friends. And my mother kept all my aerograms. There's a stack, enormous, that does tell all the tales of, I've just made somebody, this little tailored coat or a muumuu or something like that, or a costume that was the Spanish theatre people. And also
going to Dior.
I know. Brad and I met an amazing journalist who then invited us to go. We had front row seats at a Dior collection on the gold seats in the house of Dior. I can't remember any of the clothes, but I can absolutely remember the feeling of the people and just, sitting on those chairs and being in this extraordinary place and being really treated really wonderfully. And then I had to learn my few sentences in French to say, I went to knock on the door of Chanel. I walked around there many times before I got brave enough to be able to go and knock on the door and say, I'm from Australia, do you have a job for me? That was the only French I could speak properly. But they didn't have a job for me, but they were so kind and took me in, showed me it was really, really extraordinary, and it stayed with me when I'd have young students come to knock on my door or want to come to be a part of work experience and things. I knew how they felt and what it was like to be able to work up the courage to say, can I come and, be in your case? And I did then work for Mia and Vicky, who they spoke English, they were American, so I knew that, I could work out what to do, and I did a bit of sewing.
I know, and she was doing that, going to Dior, and Vern was so ahead of his time with his love of vintage. He actually got all these Dior, Duchess satin ball gowns, and we used to have to sell them on sale for £5 because no one wanted them. This was 1970, 71, and these were 50s new look, just going into the new look. Exquisite ball gowns, and they took so much space up in this tiny little room where we used to operate from. But we almost had to give them away because everyone wanted the little Fortuny sort of bias cut, florally chiffon see-throughs and 40s dresses. But so, those 50s ball gowns were not in vogue. And then when I saw that Dior show, I just couldn't believe it because it was just full of these same clothes that we couldn't sell. And it's just a question of, vintage being ahead of yourself is, well, we all know what that means.
So, 1972, Gough Whitlam's now in power. Australia is suddenly a different place to what you had both left. Why did you want to come back? And did you feel there was going to be a whole new movement here? There was an excitement around Australia again, what did you bring from your international experiences, I suppose, that you wanted to do in Australia? Let's start with you.
Okay, but we came back because Mike was doing a show for George Mora. we had no intention of staying in Australia. And the minute we set down in this country, the blue skies, the whole experience of this sort of sunny country just sort of hit us. But then Whitlam had just got in as well. So, suddenly we found ourselves at the Bunnythan Gallery with, Brett Whiteley's show and, Michael stepped on Margaret Whitlam's foot and, suddenly we were thrown into this energy of this country which we saw had changed. In 7 years it really had changed, and there was a feeling in the air, just like the feeling that I had when I first went to London in 1965. It just, the same feeling was here in Australia at the end of 1972, and Michael and I just knew we had to stay here, and we did. And then, living in Merca's little place 6 months later, the beautiful Flamingo Park was started. It took 6 months for that shop to open, from the time of the thought of what it could be to when it actually opened.
And Linda, you were a Melburnian, and then you moved to Sydney, and after you met this one. And so what did that landscape and this city do for your eye? What did it bring to your work?
I grew up at the beach. We both grew up beachside, and to be drawn to Bondi and meeting Jenny and the whole shop and the shop opening and coming up and just being involved in that. Well, the same. We say the blue sky, the poinsettias, the flowers of the city. It just was inspiring.
But it's also a funny thing to say, but like when we actually came back and decided to live in Bondi, all our friends said, "Why are you going to live in that dump?" Seriously, how have times changed? And how have times changed from the Bondi that I was born in, 1947. But then Linda and Fran came up in November of 1973, and then everything started to
The Opera House opened. We saw it.
I know, but our second parade was at the Bondi Pavilion, and slowly all these artists started moving there, and like Bondi didn't. I know it's this incredible place now, but really but it always was a working class suburb, and that's why there's all those little flats. Mum used to walk the sand dunes to Bondi before there were any of those little flats in the 20s, But anyway, that's a whole other story. But where were you going with this?
Bondi Tamarama Bronte became the outdoor studio. The mountains was the landscape studio, but we did many amazing photographic adventures just all around that walk, where there was never very many people. Really.
We're talking about Cannon Street.
Cannon Street, between Bondi, Bronte,
Tamarama. Yeah, where the sculpture by the sea is. That's where we lived, right on the ocean. Yeah, so it was pretty amazing, and I think it was $27 a week. Put it in perspective.
Look, I think in your amazing story, the joint story at the beginning particularly, the most notable thing and what I guess you're most famous for is the fact that you gave Australian fashion its own identity. Can you describe a little bit, say Linda, to begin, what the fashion scene was like in Australia before you guys took over?
My first job was in the bridal salon. This is before I went away, but I worked in the bridal salon that was on the top floor of Sports Girl. And Sports Girl in Collins Street in Melbourne was pretty groovy. So I guess, but everyone was copying overseas. Whenever anything was happening, it was always about what was over there. And I mean, the beautiful places that had beautiful clothes would have maybe, I'm not sure the way that they worked it, but you could sort of copy something and then have it made to sell in your shop. It was everything was from overseas. So we were just beginning to want to do our own thing, what
Still
we
is a
really
lot.
love to wear.
No, not us, but still, they still go overseas. Just saying.
Yeah, so, you know, sorry. Yes.
So it was quite generic and European.
Well, I always had to make my own clothes anyway, so whatever we were doing, we wanted to wear the things that we wanted to make, what we were inspired by. It just happened that way, so we weren't thinking even to begin to think about what was overseas. That was for other people. If they wanted to do that, fine. We didn't have to. We became really free to be really creative, to have no borders, no boundaries, so, you know, we weren't wanting to copy anybody. We didn't even think like that at all whatsoever. Other people, when I made patterns, would say that, you know, they'd show you the photograph and they'd want you to make something exactly like what somebody else had done. We didn't have any idea of even contemplating something like that.
Because you're creative souls.
Yeah, but it was actually, you know, when we met, the magic that happened. Look, the thing is that I was obsessed with the 50s when I came back to Sydney, and Linda was making all these beautiful 50s clothes out of vintage fabrics.
It was going to work, wasn't it?
I think it was written in the stars, frankly.
But so, you know, so we both had that aesthetic as we met, you know, and I think that that was the start of it. It was 50s and how excited we got by that. But the thing is that once we got together, magic started to happen. We just always wanted to be around the beach, but then we'd go into the bush. And when we started going into the bush, I remember I found that piece of fabric, a tempe tip of bib and bub. Yeah, where the shorts are actually in the shop.
Yes.
And, you know, they're one of the first little shorts that Linda ever made, which I found this beautiful fabric. But that was sort of like a trigger. You know, we just started getting enveloped in the world of bib and bub and gum nuts, and it was on that sort of level at first, but then it went deeper and deeper. The more we discovered, walking in the bush with Linda for me was, you know, I'd grown up at Bondi, yes, and then I went straight to London. My mother used to have, you know, the can of Mortein spray, and she would spray anything that moved. And we had green lawn, and that was it. And you know, we used to go up to the mountains together, and it was walking through the bush with Linda that I really discovered nature in a way that I can't. It was like a born again experience, actually, to walk with her in nature. And I say this really deeply because I've lived in the Blue Mountains for the last 43 years, and I just love it. But going with Linda into the bush, the way she would always see faces in the trees, and just the peace that I felt when I used to go with her was an experience of really discovering and feeling the earth, and that's, you know, obviously stayed with both of us the way we've journeyed into all the different aspects of this country as our inspiration. But for me, I'm up in the Blue Mountains because I so deeply feel connected, and that was with you, sweetheart.
Well, we had an amazing time together. And then the practicality of is how can we turn our ideas, can we find people who can paint? Jenny had her gorgeous friend Charlotte who hand painted some, and they're actually in the exhibition, which is really wonderful, really emotional as well. You know, we were trying to find out how can we translate. We have all these ideas. How can we make them happen? Because making textiles and things in Australia wasn't, you know, you had to print thousands of meters and, you know, it was all big and we were bespoke and small. So to try to work out how can we make these things happen was part of our, you know, frenzy about trying to make our creations happen. The knitting and the printing and the hand painting, you know, that became our major force of trying to make them happen.
On the knitting front, now when we spoke a few weeks ago before the exhibition opened, I sort of said to Jenny, but who used to make the jumpers? Like, how are they, like, they're handmade, right? And Jenny's like, yes, tell us about the network of knitters.
Well, I guess my greatest talent is finding talented people to execute my ideas. And I just had this idea that winter was coming, and I, what are we going to do for winter? And so I thought, well, it goes back to London, and they're all in the exhibition. The first thing I ever bought from Vern at the Chelsea Antique Market wasn't a beaded Chanel dress. It was a Richard Attenborough fan club jumper. Because it was the most unusual thing I'd ever seen. It's not that I probably even knew much what Richard Attenborough did, but his signature was across the jumper knitted in, and all his films were knitted in on the back. And it cost me 50 pence, and I thought it was the most divine thing I'd ever found. And I'm just thinking of the before room, you know, because you're going to go into the before room first. And I think of that doggy curtain that I got, and I don't know where this is going with the knits, but it doesn't matter because it's about the hand and the hand work. So whether it be a knit or whether it be all the embroidery, that's what I fell in love with. And that's what led me to love, you know, Guatemalan, African, just incredible beaded Indian, you know, just things done by hand. And when I think of the Madge Jewel dress that's in the before room, she was a famous clairvoyant, and she used to go into trances, and she used to do her embroideries. I got one of her dresses. That is how I decided that what am I going to do for winter? The shop is here. We've had all this beautiful summer of 50s prints. I will do hand knitting like my jumpers that I love from London. I will do pure Villa Wool 12-ply, and I will put Australian motifs on those jumpers. It wasn't any more than that. There wasn't a plan. It was just kangaroos, kookaburras, koalas. That's how it started. And one of the very first zip-up cardies is on show. That is probably one of the first ones that was ever made, and that's in the Flamingo Park room. And it was as unself-conscious as that, out of necessity.
But you had the whole knitting network was sort of.
Well, I went on
right?
television and I said, I need knitters. That's what I said on the women's show. Is there any knitters out there? Tell me. You know, knowing I was on telly. And the very next day, in came Jan Ayres, tall, beautiful, gangly English girl with a suitcase full of fabulous knitting. And I thought, that's it, we're on the go. And it was, yeah, but that's how simple it was and how amazing it was.
And that's how many people came into our lives. Deborah Laser with beautiful hand painting, and, you know, Charlotte in the beginning. We just attracted people to come and be creative over the years who become part of our shows.
Peter and all his jewellery, all his plastic jewellery.
The store itself became like a creative hub for the city, really, didn't it?
Absolutely.
Well, it was also that we chose, or that I chose to the shop to be in the Strand Arcade. I mean, the Strand Arcade then was full of milliners and cobblers and shirt makers and they had a machine knitting shop, and you know, it was a backwater, you know, and Lloyd Lomas was the one who he had his hairdressing salon down the George Street end, and he said, Jen, don't look in Oxford Street, come into the Strand and have a look. And that's how I found the shop. It was $40 a week, and it was in the middle of the aisle, Suite 67, and then when I met Linda and her clothes went into the blue room and we had our first parade, I created the red room just for her evening wear.
And why was that? Why did you need to have the second room visually?
Because I had to have a room for Miss Jackson's beautiful dresses. So I created a Mao red and Schiaparelli pink red room, which was billowing pink taffeta curtains and her exquisite clothes. And when I stand in that red room, it just feels like it did. And that is so exciting to know that all the old people that used to come to the shop, but then my little 15-year-old is so obsessed with those two rooms. It's just so wonderful to think we're playing to, you know, oldies and older than us. Then we have, you know, the beauty of romance was born, and then we go down to our 15-year-olds, and then Linda and I witnessed 2 3-year-olds threw themselves into the blue room the other day,
And then the red room.
and then threw themselves into the red room, and then jumped all over the colour and shapes room, and oh God, just going,
We're the
oh my God,
curators.
because they think it's a
They were
playground.
only tiny.
They think the show was a playground.
How wonderful.
That is what's so exciting.
They did behave themselves.
Well, they did when I came up to them. That's what the show is. It's like a playground of beauty and fun and colour and joy. And if that's what we can leave with people walking out with that sense of happiness, then that's a good thing. In this world right now, it's a really good thing.
Now, after a period of time working together, you decided that it was time to, you know, focus on individual projects and things. When did you know it was the right time? How did you know
How do we know what was
that it was the right time to sort of work on individual projects?
It just sort of happened. It was the Opal show, and I could see that Linda needed to do her own art more, and I needed to do my own art more, and it was sort of just a natural
Progression. Yes.
Yeah.
I had to have a bigger studio because I wanted to, you know, get into my own screen printing and things like that. So it really just evolved because we never lost our friendship or the admiration that we had for each other, but it just sort of meandered off. I just had to have a bigger studio and we went our separate ways.
Exactly. And it felt right at the time, and you know, I was developing, you know, the personality of my my persona, and you know, you were starting to work more with Indigenous.
I went to Alice Springs and Lightning Ridge.
Yeah. So what drew you to those places? Why did you want to go?
Well, I guess the travel, loving the travel, but wanting to know more about our country and just wanting to go to Alice Springs because I had dreams about it. I just wanted to to be able to experience it. And then going there and meeting Robin Davidson and some other amazing women, to be able to be taken to some, to Utopia, one of my first, the Indigenous communities that I went to, then and being invited to go back to really meet the women later on and to use their textiles, their batik, and we've borrowed from the NGV, the Utopia outfit that dates back to that time. So we have that piece here, and I wanted to know more about country and more about just being out there. So that was really special, and that I kept wanting to travel out there a lot, and eventually went out there to live. Much later on.
Yeah. And what sort of things did you work on, sort of technique-wise, and with your textiles in that time? So some fantastic, incredible textiles from the Bush Couture range and all that.
Well, I saw a gum leaf and it said print me. So experimenting like that, making every mistake that you can possibly make, wrinkling the fabric, doing everything, all the things that you are not meant to do, was the way that we discovered this whole other way of screen printing. And then it was amazing to get one beautiful piece like an artwork, and then to work out how can we keep printing a few more that, so we can get a few more meters. Things like that were pretty tricky, and I had some amazing people come to work with me, in the screen printing. We had a whole setup in the studio to do that. So then I didn't want to cut them up. I wanted them, they were like paintings, so they became, I couldn't cut them up. That's how it became into beautiful big jackets and the ponchos, and using them more like textiles or artworks or paintings. So, I learned a lot about how to make it work like that. And then eventually we were able to be printing more meters and, be able to do furnishing fabrics and things like that. But when it became the bigger quantities, then I would work with another printer who would be able to repeat some of it. But the ones that are mostly in the exhibition are all the original, using the gum leaves and metallic paints and string and different things like that.
I love what you're saying about not wanting to cut up the fabrics. And there was a time that you were actually, so that you would work with the batiks that the women had made themselves, you would actually give them the fabric, I understand. So
well, when I went out to Utopia, they were just doing simple things like T-shirts that they could do some batik on. So I would get a collection of their beautiful silks, and I'd make really, really simple things because I didn't want to cut up their beautiful artwork. And so then I would send the ladies the odd sort of a gathered skirt or a simple shape that they could then do the batik on. And they'd send me messages back saying they had a bit of a laugh about what was this, or what kind of a skirt was this. So because they all wore really simple clothes and lots of layers. So we were sort of on the same wavelength in a way.
And you were teaching a lot of the women things, but what did you learn as well?
Well, I learned about sitting down, being with the women, sharing stories, learning about culture, and from the different communities over the years that I went to, I learned a little bit of language. My first words would usually be, "Can I make you a cup of tea?" Something like that, because just to be there and doing art projects, helping if they wanted to do screen printing or painting, quite simple things in the beginning. It would usually be through the Women's Centre before there was an art centre in the community, or like at Santa Teresa or out at Yundamu. The women's centres were the hub for the women because they go there to do their washing, and then they'd start wanting to do more artworks, and they'd see another community being really successful, so they say, can we have somebody come to teach us a bit of that sort of painting or screen printing and, different things like that. So, I could go out for a short time in the early days to work with the women, and, once people know that you love being out there, that you can go camping, well, you do get invited back a bit more.
Oh, I love that. Now, you're both incredibly spiritual women, and there are two very, very special rooms in this exhibition, with two very special pieces. Maybe Linda, actually, I'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the Zen Waratah?
Well, my interest in Buddhism and Zen started really early, I think, early in my life. I think I loved Kuan Yin and just, went to the Theosophical Bookshop in Melbourne really early and trying to find books and learn a bit more about things like that. And then the travel in the East, I went to so many Buddhist temples in Borobudur in Indonesia, and that just became absorbed in my life. And I love reading, and I would read and collect, and I love the art and the philosophy. So I think it just has stayed with me from that time, and loving the robes, and because I can sew, and that piece has actually taken about 10 years to do. So from being in the bush, dyeing the cloth in the black wattle bark, that's, I've got some land out near Mudgee, so chopping up the wattle bark, burying the cloth for months at a time, re-dyeing it, and then also going through the process of the indigo dyeing, and then stitching the pieces together by hand like a Buddhist monk's robe, the meditation in the thought process of that, and then eventually it became a kimono, and then eventually it had waratahs printed and painted on it with the gold, and then a few years later, more pieces became added, and then it's actually been in a few exhibitions up in Cairns and in Bendigo. So it's been around, and it's amazing. The rooms for both our two works are completely extraordinary. They're quite separate from everything else, and this piece looks like it's floating. I mean, the way that Tony was wanting to, I thought I was going to have a Japanese sort of a room, but it evolved into this exquisite piece, and it's just pretty awesome.
And they both really are intended to be and are like rooms for contemplation. They're really incredible. Yes. So there is so much visually in the exhibition, and then you can just come into these very quiet spaces and have a moment. And Jenny, the White Waratah Warrior is just such an extraordinary story. Please tell us all about it.
Well, I created Transformer, the White Waratah Warrior, walking the sacred path. I created that as a memory and a tribute to my partner who committed suicide in 2001. I created that in 2006 because the Powerhouse Museum had a wonderful team called the Recycle Project Team. They came to the Powerhouse to do their thing. And their thing was, a long time before recycling, I guess, their thing was you would go to them with a piece of worn clothing, and they would restructure it and recreate it into something new for you. So Masahiro came up to the mountains, and I presented him with a box of Danton's really worn t-shirts. And then we started on the process of an extraordinary collaboration, because one of them was a Uni-Oz t-shirt that Danton had actually worn to 7 holes, and the Uni-Oz vest, knitted vest, that if you look at the gown, you will see it. That's the sort of warrior vest, is the Uni-Oz vest that Danton had from the age of 15 till he wore it till it nearly fell off him in holes. And Masahiro was so touched by what he saw in front of him, but also the Uni-Oz, one of the Uni-Oz t-shirts, he had, his mother had come to Australia in 1986, and she brought him back Uni-Oz sheets. And Masahiro, as an 18-year-old boy, had slept in these sheets. So when he saw the print, the Uni-Oz print on the Danton t-shirt, he sort of wept, because it really meant a lot to him. I didn't know. But from then on, we had this heart collaboration, and I made many drawings talking about how I love the Waratah, and I showed him notes that Danton used to send me to my beautiful red Waratah from your cranky white Waratah, because I used to call him a white Waratah because he was so rare and so amazing, and had suffered from the illness, this serious illness of depression. So Masahiro and Chloe Simcox, who worked with me on the Olympic garments, which are a very beautiful feature of the show. She came with Masahiro to realise this exquisite white waratah gown. Masahiro had brought out a Japanese wedding kimono. He didn't know why he brought it to Australia. It was an old white kimono, and he offered it to me to be part of the gown. So the petals on the gown are from his Japanese wedding kimono, and on the petals of that gown are written the purification mantra, which is the Vajrasattva mantra. That is my practice. That is what I do every day. And it's a 100-syllable mantra. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Tito Tito Mebawa Sudukaya Mebawa Supukaya Mebawa Anurakta Mebawa Sava Siddhi Me Prayacha Sava Kama Susa Me Siddham Shriham Guru Hum Ha 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 O Bhagavan Sava Tata Gata Vajranama Nusa Vajrapava Samaya Sato. I do that mantra every day, and in the petals of that dress is written that mantra. It is the purification mantra. It helps me. It helped me get through the period of his departure. And that is why I have written that mantra into the gown, and it is the most meaningful piece for me in the show because it's the white waratah, and it's about purity. So I've gone very quiet now.
What do you hope other people get from it?
That feeling. Gantron arrived in Australia, and the t-shirt that's on the gown is also there, but you can't see it. He arrived in Australia with a t-shirt, and he had Transformer written on it. And that's what he's done for me. He's transformed my life in ways that I never knew possible. I'm not an unhappy girl. I've lived through the greatest suffering, and I've come out to have this show with a friend that I've had for nearly 45 years, and it doesn't get much better than that. We really live simply so others may simply live. We walk our talk. We live humbly. I love to dress up when I come to Sydney. I love to put on my red lips. But in the mountains, I've just got my flannel shirts, which I wear a flannel shirt one a week. And I'm just so low-key. I have my Dharma friends, and it's a pretty beautiful life because I live at one and so close to in one of the most beautiful parts of the world. And this show is just the greatest joy in my life. And when I say that I want you, that I hope you all walk, I want you to all walk out happy. I hope you walk out happy because that's the greatest gift that we could give to you.
We've been really lucky for this exhibition to happen now. It could have happened 10 years ago because maybe that's 20 years ago. The fact that it's happened now, and for what Jenny's just said and what we've been through together, and for the last year and a half to have been thrown together in this incredible way, to be delving into each other's lives in an even bigger way than we would have ever known, because it's 45 to 50 years, has been extraordinary, and it's an emotional, overpowering, incredible time that we've been through. So the whole team that we've worked with to make this exhibition the way that it is, they have created something that is incredibly beautiful. So we're feeling the emotion as we begin to walk through all the rooms because it's being captured. So all of us working together, they've captured our spirit or how we feel about each other that you can't often put into words but they've captured the feeling in the space, and with the music that's been created as well, which is really beautiful. There's a beauty about it all, and it's, can leave one speechless and people saying it's awesome, but that's because of whatever it is that's brought us together in the first place has also kept us together as wonderful friends.
It's such an incredible story, and when we spoke there.
Oh no, I just wanted to say that it's, and I know she's not going to want me to, but Lisa Havilah is the most amazing person, this new director. I'm sorry, but I have to say, because Lisa understands creatives, and she has let us have free rein. We got the most incredible creative director in Tony Asnes. We have had the most extraordinary team from the Powerhouse to execute our dreams, and without it's because of collaboration that this show has happened in this way. But being allowed to be this creative has been just such a gift, and I thank you, Lisa Havilah.
Yeah.
Look, can't they just go in and see the show?
Well, I know it does feel like kind of the natural end, but we are a little early, and I don't want to also deprive them of even another moment. But so I just want to finish with, you mentioned collaboration there, and it's such a phenomenal legacy that you have, and I'm getting emotional again. But working with the Romance with Born guys, for example, how important has that been for you?
Look, when they started, I think they had their first show in Melbourne. Was it in Melbourne? Well, I got a call from a friend in Melbourne to say, have you seen these kids? They are called Romance Was Born. They're like you, but they're not you. They're like them, but they're like you. And this excitement that came down the phone, and I thought, oh, Romance Was Born, what a fabulous name. I'm thinking of Flamingo Park, Step Into Paradise, and then Romance Was Born. It just had the same flavour. And then Linda and I had to open a little pop-up shop for them, and we danced on the dance floor for Vogue's 50th birthday, and I was, absolutely enchanted. Like, we are their mum and dad, we're their mentors. They are, just the most creative couple, that I've seen for a very, very long time. Ever since us, to be honest, in this country. And Linda and I have both done the two most fantastic collaborations. I was in Paris last year with them, and Linda was at the Art Gallery in 2015. They're just, their energy and their creativity is boundless.
Yeah, and they've got a magic of being able to work with artists and work with their artwork in really amazing ways. That's collaboration of a really top level, and to absolutely acknowledge the artists, but they are the fashion designers, and how, being around them and watching the two of them sort of work together and how they work collaboratively themselves, even with every single part of what they do, they need to be congratulated.
Yeah. Do you find it very satisfying working with them, that this whole new generation is discovering your work as well through them?
Discovering our work, but discovering about this country, and discovering that you actually can look to your own country. There is so much inspiration in this country, to the people in this country, to the ancestors of the land. You don't need to be looking further. You can if you want to, but you can learn from the university of life is out there, so you can you can look to all of that, but they had their rose, we've got a waratah. They had their chrysanthemum, we've got a waratah or a Sturz Desert. Our country is full of life and inspiration.
Because there was a time that Australiana was almost a dirty word, really, in terms of design and fashion, and I'm
not to be thought of as something of value.
Yeah,
it was
and
just
it was a bit
fun.
kitchen fun, and
I think that
changed.
I think it changed when Anna Piaggi called it fashion arose from another hemisphere in Italian Vogue in 1977. I think it did change because when that woman put her stamp of approval on us, all the fashion magazines in this country really, really understood that someone on the highest level, because Anna Piaggi, I don't know whether you know Anna Piaggi, but she was the greatest female in fashion that the world will have ever seen. In another 100 years, they will be saying, who or what is this woman? What is this woman who is wearing a library of clothing going from the 17th century to 2000 and whenever she died? You know, she was a walking history of clothing and style in the most incredible way. She loved Linda and I when we went to Italy, in 1977, and you know, I was witness to Vern and Anna meeting at the Chelsea Antique Market in 1968. She came in with the Massonis, and Anna and Vern met, and that was it. They were, you know, became the two most stylish people that I have ever known, and will ever know. I mean, between Anna and Vern and Bill Cunningham, number 3, they, you know, these giants have died, and now, yes, I will add him, Karl Lagerfeld. Yeah.
There's in the exhibition, of course, also is the Chanel suit for which he used the opal print, and I understand from Glynis, the curator, that he found you because you couldn't print the fabrics in Australia, and that you had to have them printed in Italy, and that's where he saw them.
Well, no, but when Linda went, when Linda went into Indigenous world, I was going over to Milan to have my fabrics printed by Fabio Bellotti of Rainbow Fabrics, and that is when I met Karl at the Scala with Anna and Vern, and I was decked out in all my collage of clothing and colour, and he was entranced. And then Anna did a big story on me for her new magazine called Vanity Magazine, which, by the way, is a collector's item. If you ever get to see them, they are incredible. And it was that's how he saw the opal print and used it for his first range with Chanel in 1983, 2 years after Linda and I had done it. Mm-hmm. Well, we both had our different versions of the opal, but he used my opal print in 1983, and we did our last opal show together in 1981.
What you were saying before quickly about Anna having put you in Italian Vogue, and suddenly everyone here had to really take notice. Was it really that sort of case back then that you had to get that international validation before? Obviously, there was a scene happening here. But it was that.
Yep.
That's it. Yeah. Do you think we've now changed?
Let's not cut around.
Yeah. But we could have stayed over there and not ever come back. But
thank you for coming back.
But we wanted to come back to Australia. We just had an amazing time, and I met Jenny's wonderful friends, but we didn't want to be there. We knew what we were doing. They knew that what we were doing was beautifully done, the best and colourful and everything that Anna said. Exotic. But we came back and knew, well, we'll just keep on being better. Mm-hmm. And we'll keep on doing what we love, because that's what we have to do.
As you both continue to do. What an absolute pleasure to have you two tonight. I'm going to try not to get emotional. But thank you for being such an incredibly attentive audience.
Many thanks to the Powerhouse Museum for providing this free event to listen to Jenny Key and Linda Jackson talk about their amazing collaboration and B, giving us the permission at So Organised Style Podcast to let you listen into their conversation. This episode of So Organised Style was produced by me, Maria Theoharis, sound by bensound.com. So Organised Style, spelt with an S, not a Z, is available on our website soorganisedstyle.com with all the links for this special podcast. You can also find our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio and Castbox. Subscribe to our podcast to listen to earlier podcasts and tell your friends about our podcasts. We publish podcasts each fortnight unless we have newsworthy podcasts just for you. Thanks for listening.